Hello, everybody. It's really an honor to be here. And I'm really proud of our Baltic brother, Lithuania, to be the first one to establish a national EdTech cluster. Estonia is just in the discussions of establishing something like that here. So, but let's go to the presentation then, and share a bit of thoughts on why do we need to have this kind of things at all. And of course, the goal is that Lithuania could say that we are the world leading education innovation powerhouse. And let's see if some of these ideas that I'm going to share now will help to make this happen. But firstly, we should stop changing education. The education system already is excellent, and it can't be made significantly better. And Estonia already is #1 in Europe according to the PISA test. Of course, this is just a joke here. We discussed with Kinvila that this would be good to get on attention. From my personal background, I've had the dream of improving quality of education and enabling access to education to everybody globally for quite some time. I've been in education development for about 16 years, and during this time set up 4 companies in education and 3 non-for-profit organizations. And we're just discussing that actually there is already a grassroots level cooperation happening between Estonia and Lithuania. For example, BitDegree, which is one of the largest Lithuanian EdTech companies, is quite actively being used also in Estonia. And one of my personal companies called Dream Apply, which is a student admissions management platform, is really actively being used in Lithuania. We have almost all of the larger Lithuanian universities working with this solution. But let's go straight into the topic, like why to innovate education at all. And I think the most important reasons here is the paradigm shift that we are seeing at the moment happening. So we're moving as a society from industrial era to information era. And of course, this totally changes the product of the school that we should get. And this brings on board the need to ask fundamental questions again, like why should we have school or education in 21st century at all? What's the purpose of education? Then we should discuss what should be taught in this school. And actually the tech is the last one. So then we can start discussing what is the best way to teach in 21st century education. And in other words, the questions are, do we learn what we should learn in school? And secondly, do we learn the way that is the most meaningful? But of course, to make this happen faster, that we would have a shift happening in the education, empowering innovation of education is a reasonable thing to do. And just to make a point here that innovation of education is nothing new. Gutenberg's printing press from 1440s was probably the most impactful tool that we invented, and that has had a massive impact on global education development. But if we start discussing about, okay, how do we then improve the ecosystem, or how we make innovation of education work for us better? Then one of the things that we have been looking at is kind of how could we improve the ecosystem for people? So how could we have a better environment for people that have ideas how to make education better? So these ideas would be actually shared with others, and they would become real solutions for the people in need. And if we talk about the ecosystem here, I like to bring a very simple example. So let's imagine that somehow we got our hands on the Sahara Desert, and we would like to plant a forest. So let's say that we start planting this forest, and what happens is that, of course, all the plants, the seedlings die. And very quickly we find out that, hey, there is a problem in the ecosystem. There is too little water in the desert, so the trees cannot grow. And if we think this way, we can very quickly understand, like, okay, what's wrong in our ecosystem if we have a certain goal? And it's the same in education development. So we should look at the people that have ideas how to make education better. And then to analyze the quality of the ecosystem that we are operating in, we can see when do these ideas die. The worst quality of ecosystem is where the ideas die already before they are even talked about. So the ideas are dying before they are even born, because people feel that it doesn't make sense to talk about my idea because nobody cares anyways, and I won't be able to make this happen anyways. And the perfect or the best probably ecosystem for developing an idea or education would be that the ideas are born, they are talked about, they are getting support at each stage of developing a solution, and eventually we'll have a solution that everybody loves and that creates real value in the society. And maybe even globally, everybody is kind of taking advantage of this new innovation, like we are using the printing press today for like printing books, and that are being used almost globally everywhere. So, and how to improve then the ecosystem, or how to understand where are the problems in the ecosystem? The easiest way to find out is just to ask from the people that have ideas how to make education better. They will know straight away what was the reason why they didn't make their idea come true. And then we can eventually start seeing bottlenecks that can be removed from the pathway of the innovators. And the other thing that we can see is that there will be some things that are actually empowering people that are enabling them to make innovation of education happen. And for example, in Lithuania's case, there is a really good technical skill set already in people. The government is, or the political system is quite stable, and let's say the wealth of the nation is quite good already. So there is many things that actually are already supporting the innovation ecosystem. And these things could be probably improved even to make people more actively engaged in education development. I will just give a few examples of bottlenecks as ideas. So if we look at online learning, there is a massive amount of online learning actually happening already today. But what is the issue very often is that it's almost impossible for a learner to show that, hey, I actually learned this already. So this could be overcome by setting up kind of learning badges or certification for online learning, or learning analytics that could prove that, hey, this person already studied this kind of things. And this way we could overcome this kind of bottleneck. Then very clearly there is a limited synergy between educators and employers. So it's difficult to bring the best companies in our country to talk about, hey, what kind of people do you actually need? What kind of skill sets do they have to have? So we would have the best possibility of providing a high level of workforce and make a better economy for a country. Of course, many people in the education sector don't want to think this way at all, like, hey, we should not develop people for being successful in economic capacity. But if we want to be really honest, this must happen as well. I mean, it's not only about broad personal development, but people that are finishing school should be successful also economically afterwards. And this is very hard to achieve if there is not a very good dialogue between the education sector and employers. So, and there is, of course, many measures how this kind of things could happen. I'm just mentioning here micro degrees, for example. So people that are looking at going to work somewhere could have very spot-on learning happening that is concretely necessary for their career building. And I think, again, Lithuanian own BitDegree is a really good example here. So what we also see is that the education system is about 250 years old as it is today. And unfortunately, the major breakthroughs in psychological research and neurosciences. So psychological research, probably around 100 years, we have had major breakthroughs in understanding how human mind works. And in neurosciences in the past 40 years or so. Almost nothing of these findings or breakthroughs have been successfully applied in the 250 years old education system. So I will just bring one example. For example, we know very well how motivation is built in a human. And also we know how motivation is demolished. And if you look at the books and methodologies that we are using in school in general, very few of these methodologies are using the knowledge that we have developed in the research. So of course you can counter argue with me, but I'm more than happy to go into details here afterwards. And another big issue is a microservices-based approach. It hasn't made it to education yet. And this is exactly inviting the people that have ideas to come on board and make their ideas happen, and to have an ecosystem where their solutions could spread nicely to the people that actually need these solutions. And it requires probably a little bit more detail to open this topic up, but so if this is interesting for you, please get back to me on LinkedIn afterwards, and I'm more than happy to share documents on this approach. So just to show that Lithuania hasn't been sleeping so far as well, there is quite a good amount of activities that we have done together between all of the Northern European countries, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, and all the Scandinavian countries as well. And one of these things is called the Nordic EdTech Forum, which is an association of innovators of education in the Northern Europe. At the moment, we have about 180 people there who are mostly founders of EdTech startups. And the goal of this organization is to show to the EdTech startups founders that, hey, there's other people in neighboring countries as well that are having the similar passion to improve the quality of education or make something better in education. And when you meet them, it can be a very empowering experience for you, and you can probably learn something and maybe even cooperate with others. And what I believe in is that the first level of why we need this kind of associations is that we would foster the culture of friendship between people that have passion for improving education. And then if the friendship is already there and people are starting to support each other, peer-to-peer counsel each other, then on top of that, it's already a lot easier to build real meaningful collaboration and joining forces. Just a few examples of what we have actually done. So one of the projects that we did this spring when the school started to close down was that we invited all of the companies in education technology to open up their resources for free for teachers and learners in need. And many companies across the region joined, including Lithuania, was a really good partner in this. And in total, we had 125 companies making their solutions available globally. And this is how the system looks like. So you can see all the solutions there. Another thing that we've been doing together from the N8 side is producing an ecosystem development vision document together with United Nations. And just to give really brief insight here, one of the problems that we can see in education development is that there is actually many thousands of innovative solutions, EdTech solutions already available. But for a teacher to take advantage of these solutions, it can be very complicated, because today it's very difficult to search and navigate the solutions and find the exact solution that you need to make something happen. And for this reason, it would be really useful to establish an exchange or a marketplace where the teachers could conveniently, according to their search criteria, find the right quality tools that they could use to make education better in their classroom. Another big topic, for example, is that if a teacher is active with using digital tools, very often they need to have many different accounts to log in, and remember these logins and accounts is a really big headache for many teachers, and even worse for the learners probably. So it would be really nice to have a global educational single sign-on system that all the countries could attach to, and at the same time all the solution providers as well, and setting up an SSO gateway that everybody could use in education sector would help to make this happen almost instantly. Actually, the technology is already there, just need to push it off the ground really heavily. Ginville also asked me to talk about kind of concrete details of things that we need to keep in mind when developing the education using technology. And this is a concept that I'm using quite often to explain the connections between the different types of innovations in digital education. The most low layer here is called infrastructure. And by infrastructure here, I mean digital infrastructure. So you cannot really use good quality digital tools if you don't have internet connection or devices or devices to use the solutions. The second layer are supportive tools for educators to operate, so to manage their work in a nice way. And the dream apply, for example, for student admissions management that is saving 60% of the work time could be a good example here. The next layer is we call delivery layer. And today in education system, we are leaving the delivery very often on the shoulders of the teacher, but it doesn't necessarily have to be this way. But let's say that we still continue leaving the delivery on the shoulders of the teacher, then we could still support the teacher better by offering tools that help teacher to understand if some of the students are not being able to follow what is being taught, if some methodology would be better for some students and another methodology would be better for other students that the teacher is working with. So here we're talking about tools like learning analytics tools and other sorts of tools that can help to increase the quality of delivery. And only the fourth layer is now solutions that are consisting of content and methodology. And these are the most easily understandable tools for the wider audience, because these are tools that are meant for learning or teaching something concrete. At the same time, if the lower layers of the ecosystem are not in place, the upper layer doesn't really operate. So for example, we have a really great tool for learning mathematics. It's probably like 2 times better than existing methodology. But the teacher, because the teacher doesn't have a learning analytics system in place, cannot really make the difference, because the difference can happen over a long period of time. And this is where we are kind of lacking out of understanding the value of the highest level. The next thing to mention quickly is called Leonardo initiative. And the concept is really, what we are struggling with was to find a model where we could get the research that is really great research in universities about how we learn to be applied in the schools. And and the goal of the Leonardo initiative is to give one kind of possibility how to make this happen. And I will very briefly just cover it. The idea in general is that there is a teacher training center or a coaching center that helps the teachers to upskill and take the most modern approaches in learning on hand. Very often we see the need for this kind of coaching center if we want to bring the teachers from, let's say, industrial style of teaching, so top-down style of teaching, to a modern style of let's say, flipped classroom or problem-based learning type of style of learning, where the teacher needs to trust the learning into the hands and trust the responsibility of taking action into the hands of the learners. So if this kind of coaching center is in place, on side of this, we could set up an EdTech dedicated person that is focusing on supporting and empowering the new innovators or people that have ideas how to make education better somehow. And so the innovators could go to this specialist and show their things. If the things are already, or the innovation is already good enough, the specialist can put it on the coaching center, and the coaches can test it straight away, next day already in real life schools, and give very quick feedback to innovators of education. So this loop actually today is basically missing. If you are a new person who has ideas of how to make education better, it can be very hard for you to find the teachers that would be willing to take time to test out your ideas. And at the same time, the question is, okay, but how could we get the best ideas from academia or research to be implemented? And in this scheme, we bring in the academia to do research on these new innovations in the schools that are coached by the coaches. And through this, we create a dialogue between the researchers and the innovators. And if there is any meaningful information coming from the researchers to the innovators will do their utmost to implement these ideas and bring them to school through their activity straight away. And we have already seen this happen, but not in an organized way usually. So I hope this model can give a few ideas or inspiration how we could empower the innovation and the birth of innovation, let's say, especially. In addition, I wanted to show you really a few practical examples of why it is good to have innovation of education and to use digital tools for learning. So the Grapho game is one example from Finland. It was invented actually by a Finnish university. And the reason for it was that the university noticed that it's very hard for teachers to teach reading for teachers, for children that have learning difficulties. And and so it's very often one-on-one work, and it can be very frustrating for the teachers because the child doesn't just develop. And so what they did was that they looked at the methodology of how we teach reading in school in general. And then what they did was they noticed that the alphabet way of teaching reading doesn't make a lot of sense for the human brain. And the syllabus-based approach for teaching reading is a lot more understandable for a human brain. So they built a methodology about around syllable. And as a result, they actually started collaboration with a larger startup in education in Finland, which then made it into a learning game. And just showing you how it works as well quickly.
In, thing, king, tip.
And Cambridge University ran a study on this as well. And they found that there was no difference if the child was learning alone with the app or if the teacher was sitting on the side of the child. And the child was learning reading the same effectively. And why I like this kind of innovation of education is that we can free up the teacher's time in the areas where it's not really necessary to keep the teachers busy, because there is tons of work that the teachers know that they would like to do if they would have more time to do this. And for example, we've seen in the research that if the child's brain is preoccupied by some kind of, let's say, problem that they don't have the tools yet to figure out the solutions. Let's say the kid's parents are fighting at home and the child feels that, hey, this is my fault that they're fighting. And if you have a teacher that has basic coaching skills, if they sit down for 20 minutes with the child, very likely the teacher can help the child to overcome this anxiety and open up the hard drive space in the child's brain again, so that the child could focus on academic learning. And we know that if this isn't happening, if the child doesn't get the necessary support and the child's brain is preoccupied for a longer period of time, we can see a really dramatic loss in the academic development, and then we already can have a risk that we lose this child. Another solution to have a look at is called Linguist. Let's have a look at the video.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is it possible to learn a language in a fraction of the normal time? At Linguist, we're convinced it is, and we're committed to making language learning as easy and efficient as possible.
I know you have
How do we do it?
more examples.
Learning the right words matters. Most language learning methods teach you a lot of irrelevant vocabulary. We've analyzed vast amounts of contemporary language and teach the most frequent words first. Learning the words you actually use makes a huge difference. Instead of little details here and there, you see the big...
And, you know, what can I, as a teacher, a policymaker, or as EdTech founder, do today or tomorrow to bring this innovation happen?
Sorry, I couldn't hear most of your question because the video is still going.
I can repeat. So my question was, what me as a teacher, as a policymaker, or as a EdTech founder? So for each of these, what can I do today or tomorrow to start this innovation happen?
So as a policymaker, I would look at, firstly, is it important for Lithuania to have some kind of position in education development? And if it's true, we want to have better education for our children, then how to improve the local ecosystem? I think it's the first starting point, and how to get people that have good ideas of education development to make these ideas come true. And they should come true in a way that the solutions are scalable and sustainable. And by scalable and sustainable, I mean that if we are solving a problem in one school, we would straight away try to do it in a way where we could use the same solution in another school that has exactly the same challenge or a similar challenge. So this would enable using the innovation that is done in a country use it across the borders as well, not only inside of Lithuania. And the benefit of this is that eventually, if all the countries are having the same approach for innovating education, everybody wins more, because there is close to 200 countries in the world. If everybody of them are going to do something better in education, the quality of education in general will very rapidly increase. If we talk about teachers, then I think if we look back at the Leonardo initiative, it can be hard for the innovators to find teachers to collaborate with. What they did in Estonia was they established a co-creation program where the teachers that are willing to try out new ideas are welcomed on board, and they can work together with the innovators to develop the solutions. And of course, it can be that teachers themselves are innovators as well. It's totally okay. But why the teachers should be interested in taking part of this program is that they can, together with their children, see exactly how a product development process in today's world looks like. So and it's a quite inspiring experience. So I can really recommend this. And for the innovators or people that have great ideas of how to make something better in education, I think it's important not to give up and start making friends as quickly as possible with others that have similar thinking that they would like to make education better, because together it's a lot easier to make things done than alone. And I think this has been a kind of big issue beforehand in our countries, that we used to kind of look in front of our nose and try to focus on doing my thing. But if we don't go outside and start kind of sharing and talking to other people, it's very much more harder to find out the answers to the questions that are kind of keeping us from developing our thing further. That's a long answer to your simple question.
Indeed. So just very, very quick one. I know that in education, we don't have quick solutions. Estonia is doing great with also marketing education, with Education Nation initiative. So how can Lithuania take over Estonia?
Well, you would need to become a lot better at what you're doing.
Okay, thanks, Mart. Thanks for being.
I will just give a few concrete ideas as well. What I would do is I would very quickly try to set up a trusting dialogue between decision makers and innovators. And this is what we've been pushing for in Estonia for 2 years, and it's working. So we have almost every half a year a high-level meeting between the Ministry of Higher Education and the most active innovators of education, and together kind of figuring out how can we improve the ecosystem in Estonia. And this has started off quite a few actions from the government side as well to try to make the life better for the regional ecosystems. And the Education Nation initiative is actually one of them.